Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump.com, and welcome to the new tutorial on making a smoke monster with FumeFX and Arnold Renderer. All October long, I've had a lot of fun making these tutorials for Halloween, and I knew for the actual last week of October, for Halloween itself, I wanted to do something a little special. And over the summer, I'd read a thread on Reddit saying, what is the best horror story you can come up with in 2 sentences? My favorite one was this one. The last thing I saw was my alarm clock flashing 12:07 before she pushed her long, rotting nails through my chest, her other hand muffling my screams. I sat bolt upright, relieved it was only a dream, but as I saw the alarm clock read 12:06, I heard my closet door creak open. And this story just stuck with me. The author of these 2 lines, John Pearson, was kind enough to allow me to take his idea and turn it into a short film. So the first thing I knew I needed was some sort of 3D model to be my smoke monster. So I went to tf3dm.com and I looked through a lot of their models until I found something that made me happy. And it was this model of the Licker from Resident Evil. Resident Evil is my favorite game, and I thought the Licker had a really good look for a creature that would be made completely out of smoke. So the first thing I had to confront was how was I going to animate this guy? So I wanted to find a solution that would give me good character animation options. One thing I want to say first off is that I'm about to show you a process using this software, and I have received no endorsement, no money for it. This is just something that I found to be very useful. I hope you find it useful too. And that was where I came up with the idea to use Mixamo. And Mixamo is a really great service if you haven't seen it yet. It allows you to rig characters and then animate characters based on motion capture clips. So the first thing I did was went to their auto rigger. I uploaded an FBX of my geometry. And then here in the auto rigger, you orient the model to make sure it's facing correctly. You can use a symmetry mode, but as you can see here, my symmetry isn't quite exact, so I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to start taking these different locators and placing them on the model according to their reference. So I'll grab the chin and place it. I will drop on the wrists and place it, elbows, knees, and then finally the groin. And then I'm given a choice of different types of skeletons that I'm looking for. I'm just going to do the standard skeleton. I'll hit next. And there we go. Now I have a complete rig on my character that I can use within their system. They give you a couple of different test animations to make sure your rig is working correctly. The best one being the skinning test, where it puts it through a lot of great different poses to make sure that everything is holding the way it's supposed to. When you've confirmed that that's what you want, go ahead, hit finish. And now I can come in and add one of their animations to it. Now they have a bunch of really nice free animations that you can use, as well as ones that you pay for. There we go. We already see that see our animation applied, and we're given the ability to come in and modify it. So I can go with something that is either more hunched over or taller. Spread out the arms more. I can speed him up. And I can change the stride of his walk. I can also do things like mirror him, so if I like this action but I want to flip it, I can do that. I can go ahead, check out, and if it's a paid animation, I can pay for it. If it's a free animation, it's going to be here in my purchases. So there you go. But what I want to do right now is I'm going to come over to my characters and download that auto-rigged character we did a few minutes ago. I'm going to select it as an FBX, and I'm going to change my frame rate to 24. I'm going to hit download. I'm going to drop it here into my scenes, and then I'm going to come back to Maya. Then I'm going to open up the file I downloaded from Mixamo, and here we can see, if I bring up my outliner, we now have a full skeleton available to move the character. But what's really fun about this is if you've downloaded an auto-rigged character from Mixamo, you can then put in a Maya control rig through a Python script. So you come into this page, you download the Maya control rig script, you load the character that you've created through their auto rigging, open up your script editor, we'll load a script. Here it is in my downloads folder. Loads it right into your Python window. And if we hit execute, which is their auto control rig dialog box. Now I'm just going to go ahead and click on the rig character, but there are a lot of other options here that you can do when working with their characters and rigs. There you go. In almost no time at all, we now have a fully functioning rig for our character, and it is one of the nicer rigs I've ever seen, especially as a free service. It's got a lot of really nice fine controls, including a nice FK and IK switch. So I can come over here, now I've got my model in an IK hand, or I've got a forward kinematics rig for this hand. And I can just switch back and forth between them as I like. So now that I've got a character that's fully rigged or animated, so let's make that shot. Let's take a look at our shot here in After Effects. So this is going to be the first shot where the smoke monster appears, and you see that Kazumi's reaction is the smart one. She wants to get away from it. So I know that this shot is fairly stable, but there is a bit of camera shake that's happening here, especially when Kazumi jumps back on the bed. So to aid that, I've added a little tracker here that's tracking the position and the rotation, which we can see right here. Have keyframes on every frame. And I did that by just tracking this little piece here next to the window, combined with the dresser. Both of those are on pretty much the same plane. They're far back, closer to the wall where the monster is going to end up being. So that's a good thing. The other thing I needed to look at here is that the bed and Kazumi's legs are also going to go over the top of the smoke monster. So for her legs, I just did a quick roto brush on the top of it, which you can see here. And for the bed, I just created a mat all the way around and then hooked it up to the tracker, the same way I did for the table in the digital wall hits video. And that gives us pretty much all we're going to need out of After Effects before we're going to have the smoke monster put in. No, I'm not going step by step on this one because you've seen me track, you've seen me rotoscope, you've seen me rotobrush, and I don't think you really want to see me do it all again. But if you do need a refresher course on any of those things, you can head over to our tutorials. Down at the bottom, there's the AE Bootcamp, and we have tutorials on tracking, rotoscoping, and rotobrushing. Please make sure you check all those things out if any of this seems foreign to you. So let's head over to Maya and make some magic happen. So here we have our shot set up in Maya. We have our background still put in for placement. We have our little creature animated, and he's just kind of checking out what Kazumi's doing. And the first thing I want to do is set up a matte in the scene, because the smoke monster is going to emit from the entire geometry, but I really only need to render from about the edge of the bed up. So I don't want to waste the time rendering all of that. And I'm going to come in here, create a simple plane, and I'm just going to make sure it's wide enough that it covers the entire camera view. And then I'm going to bring it out far enough so that I know that it will not interact with any of the smoke. None of the smoke will pass in front of it. And then I'm just going to bring it up, not to quite the top of the bed, a little below, just so I have some wiggle room back in After Effects when I'm compositing. If I want it to be a little higher up, I have that ability. So to create a matte material here, so the first thing we need to do is talk about the Arnold renderer. And to create a matte material for Arnold, we have to do it a little differently than we've done in the past. So I'm going to come over here to my hypershade and bring it on over. I'm going to create a new Arnold shader from the Arnold menu, and it's just going to be an AI standard. And I'm going to name this one the matte material. I have inventive names, if nothing else. And I'm going to come down to the matte section, and I'm just going to click Enable Matte. And then with my geometry selected, I can right click and assign the material to the selection. Now, if I do a preview render, we'll see here in the alpha that absolutely nothing is being rendered underneath that card, which is exactly what we want. All right, so now that we've got that set up, I can come over to my camera. I can turn off my image plane since I don't need it. And if we IPR again, we'll see that we have nothing in the scene except for this one area of the geometry that Arnold is rendering. So let's start getting this smoke monster smoky. So to do that, I'm going to come over here to my FumeFX tab. I'm going to click on Create My FumeFX Volume. And it's much, much bigger than my geometry. You can see here the geometry is just swimming in this area. So let's go ahead and bring the size down. Bring down the width, the length, and the height to a more appropriate size. And let's go ahead and move the volume ahead a bit. So that way, if any of the smoke hits this back area, we can have it act like the wall of the room and get a little extra interaction. Now, we're going to run through our quick setup here in FumeFX, and this is going to be the standard setup that I do almost every time. I'm just going to turn on the boundless in the direction I want it. If any of the smoke goes up in the Y direction and hits the top, I don't want it to curl back down and stay in the volume. I want it to go ahead and go up. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make sure that my start frame is at 780. My end frame's at 895. That's good. I want to make sure my viewport updates every frame. We have our default path for our fume effect. That's fine. We don't need to reduce yet, but I want to turn on the always display, or display always. And I'm going to keep coming down. I'm just going to turn my maximum iterations down to about 80. I'll leave my evection stride where it is for now. And in simulation, gravity's fine, vorticity's going to be fine. I want to add a little bit of turbulence. And in the turbulence noise, let's make it pretty small, maybe a 2. Jump the frames to 12 and the detail to 5. Now on my blocking sides, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my -Z is active. So if anything hits the back of the volume, I want to make sure it swirls around just like it would if it were hitting the wall. Under fuel, I'm going to turn off fuel because I'm not going to need it. Under smoke, I'm going to check out my dissipation here. Now I don't want that smoke to last forever, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my minimum density up to 1 and my strength up to 15. And we may come back and adjust that. And my temperature, everything looks pretty good. Velocity's fine. Extra detail, let's go ahead and simulate for wavelet turbulence. And then in my render settings, again, I'm just going to turn off fire. I'm going to come down to the smoke, and let's go ahead and color our smoke a little bit. And we'll just go with kind of a brownish, light brown to like a darker light brown, kind of a grayish brown. There we go. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I need to get my geometry to start emitting some smoke. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on my geometry, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to hit the geometry source. And I'm going to come over to the properties, and I'm going to drop the icon size down. It's just always so big. I'm going to take the fuel and disable it. I'm going to, let's try 150 for our temperature. So I don't want it to go up real fast. I want it to go up and kind of linger a little bit. But I do want a little more smoke. Since we don't have any fire, I just want to make sure we have a lot of smoke pumping out. And let's see here. Our spacing is way too high. Right now our grid size is 50 by 30 by 50. That's way too small. Let's go ahead something down to maybe 0.2, 250, 150, 250. That's still pretty low resolution, but I think that's going to be good for our first simulation just to see how everything's looking. So if I go ahead and save, I'm going to go ahead and simulate, and we'll see what we've got. And the first thing we do, we find out we got nothing. We got nothing. And that is because I forgot to come in and hook up my source underneath the dynamic manager for FumeFX. So I'll rewind, save again, and we'll simulate. All right, I'm going to stop here because I want to point a few things out. The first thing is that if you look back here in After Effects, our first frame is at 807, but our first frame here is at 780, and that is because I wanted the smoke to build up a bit before the monster starts moving, which it does. That's looking really good. I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing here. I like the look of the smoke overall, but I don't like that it's going straight up. Now, to see it in Arnold right now, we're going to have to add some lights, because if we just go ahead and do a straight IPR, we're going to see that it's nothing but black in here. We're definitely getting our render. We can see the smoke and the monster in the alpha, but because there's no light, Arnold can't render the actual color. So let's go ahead and set up a couple lights real quick. So let's look back at After Effects, and we'll see that we've got two sources here. So we've got two sets of shadows, one that's over here and one that's over here. Even if I hadn't shot this, I would know that means there's two sources. And there's a big blue source up here providing the majority of the light, but there's also a fill light over here kind of aimed more towards the wall. So let's kind of replicate that back in Maya. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to create a spotlight. I'm going to look through it, back it up, and I'll increase the cone angle a bit. Just want to make sure that it's going to be big enough that all of the smoke will be covered. And then I'm going to come down to my Arnold settings, and I'm going to turn on use color temperature. And at 6500, that pale blue is about that same pale blue we're seeing here, so I'm pretty happy with that. But I know the exposure is too low, so I'm going to try 15 to start. And then if I come over and I duplicate my light, I can go ahead, look through it selected, bring it over to this other side, maybe have a little more side straight on. And this one, if we remember, is a little warmer, so I'm going to go ahead and drop the color temperature down till it's about a pale orange. There we go. let's say 4800. And I'll go ahead and drop the exposure down to 10. I don't want it to be as bright. I want that blue light to be our main key light. So let's go ahead, see what we've got. And we've got a pretty noisy render, but the smoke itself is definitely getting illuminated pretty nicely. Let's go ahead and turn off our geometry layer and take another look. And yeah, the issue I was having with the smoke coming up is definitely going to be a problem because we're not getting the shape of the geometry as well as we could. So how are we going to fix that? We want the smoke to move more into the negative Z direction back towards that wall. We're going to have to push it. All right, I apologize for that. That was unnecessary. But I'm going to come over here to my fields and I'm going to create a uniform field. I'm just going to bring it out here so I can see it. And if I come down to its attributes, I'm going to turn it off in the X direction. I'm going to push it in negative Z. And I'm going to try about 25 as its magnitude, and I'm going to turn off the attenuation. I want that field to just last forever, just continually pushing. Now, to get that field working with the smoke, I've got to come back to my dynamic relationships. I've got to turn that uniform field on. And here inside of Fume, we'll go ahead and add those spotlights while we're here. So now if I take a look through my GPU, oh, you gotta be kidding me. All right, we've recovered from that crash. And let's go ahead and turn off the geometry again. And let's go ahead and simulate to see how that uniform field is going to affect our smoke. All right, I'm going to stop here again, and we're going to see that uniform field is really pushing that smoke back. And you can see here, we're getting a much better outline in our profile. So let's check out that IPR. And again, it's still very noisy, but we haven't really tuned anything yet. But what I am seeing is that I'm not getting enough of that strong outline that I'm looking for. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to go down to my rendering settings for Fume, and I'm going to turn up the opacity a bit. Let's try 5. That's probably too much. Let's try 3. That's better. I can definitely see that more of that outline is showing up. And that's what I want. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can get that render to look a little better. Now, what I've found when rendering with Arnold is to come in and just turn down everything right at the beginning and add ray bounces back in rather than taking them away. So I'm just going to drop everything down to kind of the bare minimum that I think I'm comfortable with. So that's about it. I'm going to turn that back on. And we're going to notice something, that the render really didn't get any worse, even though I took away almost every single bounce. And the reason for that is that Arnold doesn't need render bounces to render Fume. What it does need are light bounces. So if I come back over here to my spotlight and I look at my volume samples, they're set to 2. Let's try 4. And we can see right away we're getting a lot less noise. So let's go ahead, increase our other light to 4. And looking much better again. And it's not taking terribly longer to render that. I think it's still a little bit noisy, so I'm going to go up to 5 on each of these. And that's starting to look pretty darn good to me. We could probably go a little bit higher, but this is all going to be in motion and it's going to have motion blur applied to it, so this little bit of noise doesn't really bother me. And just for argument's sake, let's go ahead, save a preview here, and let's go ahead and bring our camera samples up to 5. There we go, and we're seeing no real noticeable difference here. So I'm going to go ahead, keep that down at 1, save as many bounces as I can so the render will be as fast as it can possibly be. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add a couple more lights because I really do want there to be red eyes. So let's go ahead and create a couple point lights. And I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to go into the bones. And I'm just going to middle mouse click it up and parent it underneath the head. So now I can take my point light, and if I bring my geometry back for a moment, and come in here and get it set right about the place where those eye sockets would be. And we'll go ahead and duplicate it, and we'll bring it over. Oh, too fast, too far, too fast. And we'll go ahead and take these two, and we'll go ahead and look at the Arnold settings for these two. So again, I want to use my color temperature. I want these to be straight red, so I'm going to drop that temperature all the way down, as warm as it can be. I'm going to go ahead and increase the exposure to maybe 5. So I don't want it to illuminate the entire volume, just this area around the head and shoulders. And let's go ahead and give it 4 bounces. Same thing here, we'll turn on the color temperature, red, and 4 bounces. Now let's go ahead and take another IPR. Ah, that's the problem. I've got my bones turned off, got them hidden, and I parented them under something that was hidden. That's not going to work. So we'll need to look at the bones a little bit, but that's okay. So now if I come back to my IPR, there we go. They're starting to show up. But the whole thing is a little bit overlit right now, which I don't like. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to start tuning my lights a little bit. And let's drop this one down to 13, maybe 12. And we'll turn down our fill light. Try 9 or 8. There we go. And has that light not... No, it's over. Let's move it down a little bit. Maybe take that first one. Bring him out. And we'll turn up the exposure on both of them now. And let's adjust that one again. I think I pushed it a little too far. There we go. Now it's starting to look like 2 eyes in there. And let's go ahead and bring them down just a little bit as well. Just get everything looking balanced. There we go. Now we got 2 little eyes in our smoke. So we've looked at the render settings. We're pretty happy with those. We've looked at the motion of the smoke, but what we need to do is kind of see it in higher resolution now. So I'm going to go ahead, come up here, and I'm going to drop this down to about 0.08. So now we have a higher resolution grid size. So I'm going to go ahead, let this simulate for a little bit, and we'll see if we're good enough to finish simulating and render. All right, so that looks like a good place to stop for the moment. And we'll go ahead and check the IPR to see how our render's looking. And that's looking pretty good. We're definitely getting that strong outline of the creature. The smoke has a nice amount of detail to it. I'm really liking this a lot. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a pause. I'm going to let the simulation finish, render it out, and then we're going to meet back up in After Effects and finish this guy off. See you in a few. All right, so we're back here in After Effects now, and we've got our smoke render in. It's looking pretty nice. So let's get it integrated. So let's find a frame here towards the end that we think looks pretty good, or maybe here in the middle. And let's adjust where the smoke monster is. And this is where that little bit of extra resolution is going to come in nice and handy. Once I'm happy with the position, I'll just hook them up to the tracker. And let's go ahead and do a little color correction on him. Maybe I'm going to bring up the alpha a little bit, just get him a little more present. Not crazy amount more, but just a little more. And I'm going to come in, maybe pull some of those reds out just a hair. Just want that color to match a little nicer. Pull out just a little bit of green. Again, not too much, just fine adjustments. We did a good job matching that color in Arnold, so we don't have to go crazy with the adjustments here. And overall RGB, I'll just make them a little brighter. But I want to keep those shadows, so I want to keep it dark. There we go. Good monster should always be a little bit in the dark. It's more spooky that way. Let's go ahead, shift him over a little bit, and let's go ahead and see how that looks. All right, he's looking pretty good in there. I think actually I want to bring him back over just a touch. There we go. And let's go ahead and add an adjustment layer for some color correction to the whole scene. And again, I'll just come in, grab my curves. Just going to bring it down a little bit. So the whole scene should be a little darker. Maybe we'll accentuate those blues just a little bit. Pull out some of those reds. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and see how that's looking. And let's go ahead and add our motion blur. And we'll go ahead and just add a fast blur on top of the whole thing. Just because if we come in here and we take a look, we can definitely see he's a bit sharper than the areas around him. So maybe a 2-pixel blur, that helps integrate it a lot nicer. So we'll check it out again. That's looking pretty good. One thing that might be fun is to add a little optical flare to the eyes. Just give them a little more punch. So we'll come in and I'm just going to let's clear all our settings, just add a glow ball and have it be red. I'll go ahead, bring the scale down, and we'll make it screen over the top. And then if I duplicate my optical flares layer, I can bring that guy over. And it's a little too intense, so I'm just going to bring it down until I find the area I like. There we go. And I think the only other thing I'm going to want to do here is add some grain to the whole image. And I'm going to do that by adding another adjustment layer. I'm going to call it the grain layer. And I'm just going to add some grain through After Effects. And we'll look at our final output. And that's way too much grain, but that's okay. We're not quite making the Blair Witch Project here. Let's try maybe 25% of that amount. Maybe at a 0.3, there we go. Let's look at a full size, make sure that's gonna look good. It's too grainy again. Looks too video-y. I want more of that film look. There we go, just nice grain in the image. And I think that's looking pretty good. So hopefully you've learned a little bit of how to work with FumeFX and Arnold and how to bring everything back together here in After Effects. If you have any questions, you can always ask me on Twitter or Facebook or down in the comments. If you want to learn some more, we have more tutorials at PixelBump.com, along with other free tools and assets for you to use in your own work. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. Go and create.